The date is March 10, 1945. Tokyo is not a city of paper and wood anymore. It is a city of ash and silence. But for Lieutenant Kenji Tanaka, the silence is the most terrifying part. It is the silence of the fire wind, the calm before the B-29 Superfortresses arrive to strip the skin from the earth. Kenji stands on the oil-stained tarmac of Tofu Airfield. He is 21 years old, but in the harsh morning light, his face looks like it belongs to a man of 50. He is wearing his father's Hachimaki headband, the white silk stained with the sweat of a dozen previous sorties. Around him, the ground crew is working with a desperate, frantic energy. They are not just mechanics anymore, they are surgeons trying to keep a dying patient alive. His aircraft, the Kawasaki Ki-61 Heen, sits under a camouflage net of dead pine branches. To the Americans, it is the Tony. To Kenji, it is a Swallow. It is a beautiful, sleek machine inspired by German engineering but built with Japanese desperation. Its liquid-cooled engine is a masterpiece of complexity in a nation that is running out of spare parts. As the mechanics crank the starter, the engine coughs a thick black cloud of smoke, a protest against the low-grade fuel that is all Japan has left. "Check the supercharger again," Kenji shouts over the roar. He knows that at 30,000 feet, where the silver giants fly, the air is thin and cold. If his supercharger fails, he will be a spectator in his own execution. The mechanic looks at him, his eyes hollow with exhaustion, and simply nods. There are no more words left in Japan, only the mission. Kenji climbs into the cockpit. The space is cramped, smelling of hydraulic fluid and stale tobacco. He straps into the seat, feeling the familiar vibration of the airframe. This is his world now, a world of dials, gauges, and the cold, hard reality of the math of death. The takeoff is a blur of vibrating metal and the smell of burning rubber. As Kenji pulls back on the stick, the Swallow leaps into the air, its nose pointing toward the pale blue sky. But this is not a normal climb. To reach the B-29s, he must push his machine to its absolute limit. At 10,000 feet, the city of Tokyo reveals its scars. From this height, the burnt-out districts look like black ink spilled on a map. There are no fires now, only the gray smoke of a million lives extinguished. Kenji looks away. He cannot afford the luxury of grief. He must focus on the rate of climb. 15,000 feet, he mutters, checking the altimeter. The needle is moving slower now. The air is thinning. He can feel the cold seeping through the cockpit glass, frosting the edges of his vision. He adjusts his oxygen mask, the rubber smelling of ozone. The Ki-61 was designed to be a thoroughbred, a high-altitude interceptor that could dance with the best the Americans had. But today, it feels like a heavy, sluggish beast. The engine is struggling, the temperatures rising as the cooling system fights the thin air. Kenji knows the math of death for this altitude. For every 1,000 feet he climbs, his engine loses 3% of its power. By the time he reaches the B-29s, he will be flying a brick with wings. 20,000 feet. The sky is turning a deeper shade of blue, almost purple. Below him, the clouds look like a solid floor of white marble. He is alone in the void. Or so he thinks, until the radio crackles with a burst of static and a panicked voice. "Contact! Multiple bogies! Bearing 090! They are here!" Kenji looks to the east. At first, there is nothing but the glare of the sun. Then he sees them, tiny silver specks, like diamonds scattered on velvet. They are beautiful, and they are the end of his world. They don't look like bombers. From this distance, the Boeing B-29 Superfortresses look like celestial beings. They are sleek, pressurized, and terrifyingly fast. They are flying in a combat box formation, a wall of aluminum and .5 caliber machine guns that no single fighter should ever approach. Kenji pushes the throttle forward, feeling the engine groan in protest. He's at 28,000 feet now, his maximum ceiling. The B-29s are still 2,000 feet above him, cruising in the jet stream, a river of high-altitude wind that pushes them toward their target at over 400 miles per hour. "I cannot reach them," Kenji whispers, his breath fogging the glass. He is at full power, his engine temperature needle deep in the red. The Ki-61 is shaking, the wings vibrating as they struggle to find lift in the near vacuum of the upper atmosphere. This is the moment of realization. The Americans didn't just bring better pilots, they brought better physics. Their engines are turbocharged, their cabins are pressurized, and their guns are remotely controlled by computers. Kenji is flying a machine from the last war against a machine from the next one. But then, he sees the Lee B-29 drop its nose. It is descending, preparing for its bomb run. It is coming down into his world. Now, Kenji says, his voice cold and steady. He rolls the Ki-61 onto its back, the earth and sky swapping places in a dizzying blur. He dives, using gravity to gain the speed his engine cannot provide. The air screams over the canopy, the swallow transforming back into a predator. He is closing the gap. The silver giant is growing larger in his gun sight. He can see the nose art on the bomber, a cartoon girl laughing at him. He can see the turret domes rotating, the twin barrels of the machine guns tracking his every move. The B-29 is not a passive target. It is a flying fortress in every sense of the word. As Kenji closes to 800 meters, the entire formation erupts in a wall of tracer fire. The .5 caliber rounds look like glowing red basketballs arching to the sky. They are everywhere. Kenji weaves the Ki-61, jinking left and right, but the tracers follow him with a terrifying computer-controlled precision. This is the General Electric Fire Control System, a technology so advanced it makes Kenji's manual aiming look like a bow and arrow. Thump, thump, thump. The swallow shudders as the first rounds find their mark. A line of holes appears in the left wing, the jagged metal peeling back like paper. Kenji ignores it. He is focused on the kill zone. He needs to get within 300 meters for his 20mm Ho-5 cannons to be effective. 300 meters? He screams and pulls the trigger. The Ki-61 vibrates as the cannons roar. He sees the shells striking the B-29's fuselage, small flashes of orange against the silver skin. But the bomber doesn't flinch. It is too big, too strong. It is like throwing stones at a castle. He sees the tail gunner of the B-29, a man in a heated flight suit, staring at him through a thick pane of armored glass. For a second, their eyes meet across the void. Two men, miles above the earth, trying to kill each other for reasons that seem smaller and smaller with every passing second. Then, the world explodes. A burst of machine gun fire from the B-29's top turret rakes across the Ki-61's engine cowling. The liquid-cooled engine, the Swallow's greatest strength and its fatal flaw, is hit. A geyser of white steam erupts from the nose, instantly obscuring Kenji's vision. The smell of glycol sweet and sickening fills the cockpit. The engine temperature gauge pegs itself to the maximum. The math of death has caught up with him. In 30 seconds the engine will seize, and he will be a glider in a sky full of predators. Not yet, Kenji growls, wiping the condensation from the glass. He looks at the B-29. It is still flying, still steady. He has failed. But then he remembers the Shinton Seiku Tai, the shadow soaring unit. The men who decided that if they couldn't shoot the giants down, they would bring them down with their own bodies. He looks at his wings. They are tattered and bleeding oil. He looks at his fuel gauge. He has enough for one final maneuver. He doesn't need to bail out. He doesn't need to survive. He only needs to survive. He only needs to be a KZ, a wind that stops the fire. He pulls the nose up, the engine screaming in its final death throes. He is not aiming for the fuselage anymore. He is aiming for the tail, the delicate, vertical stabilizer that keeps the giant in the air. The final seconds are silent. The engine has finally seized, the propeller windmilling uselessly in the slipstream. The only sound is the whistle of the wind over the shattered canopy. Kenji is a passenger now, a human bullet aimed at the heart of the enemy. He sees the B-29's tail growing larger and larger until it fills his entire world. He can see the individual rivets in the aluminum. He can see the fear in the eyes of the waist gunner as the Japanese fighter closes in. The impact is not like a movie. There is no massive explosion, only the sound of 1,000 car crashes happening at once. The Ki-61's nose crumples like a tin can. Kenji is thrown forward against his harness, the world turning into a kaleidoscope of spinning metal and blue sky. He feels the swallow tear through the B-29's vertical stabilizer, the heavy engine acting as a kinetic penetrator. For a heartbeat, the two aircraft are locked together in a macabre dance. Then they snap apart. Kenji is spinning. His aircraft has no nose. no engine, and half of its left wing is gone. He is falling toward the clouds at 300 miles per hour. He looks back at the B-29. The giant is wounded. Its tail is a jagged ruin. It is banking steeply, the pilot struggling to maintain control. Then the wing dips. The bomber enters a flat spin, its massive engines roaring as it fights the inevitable. "I did it," Kenji whispers. His voice is a ghost's voice. He is bleeding from a dozen wounds, the cold air of 25,000 feet freezing the blood on his flight suit. The fall feels like it lasts for an eternity. Kenji is no longer a pilot. He is a leaf caught in a gale. The Ki-61 is disintegrating around him, pieces of the fuselage peeling away and vanishing into the void. He reaches for the canopy release. It is jammed, the metal twisted by the impact. He is trapped in his own coffin. So this is how it ends, he thinks. He looks down. The clouds are rushing up to meet him. He closes his eyes and waits for the impact. But the impact doesn't come. Instead, there is a sudden, violent jolt. The shattered remains of the Ki-61 have hit a thermal arising pillar of hot air from the burning city below. For a moment, the aircraft is buoyed upward, suspended in the haze of smoke and ash. Kenji opens his eyes. He is at 5,000 feet. The city of Tokyo is right below him. It is a nightmare landscape. The great fire of the previous night has left nothing but blackened skeletons of buildings. The Sumida River is choked with debris. He sees people, thousands of them, tiny black dots moving through the ruins. They are the survivors of the fire wind. They look up at the falling wreckage of his plane. Do they see a hero? Or do they just see another piece of the sky falling on their heads? The Ki-61 finally gives up. The right wing snaps off, and the fuselage enters a vertical dive. Kenji closes his eyes for the final time. Kenji Tanaka did not die that day. The fuselage of the Ki-61 crashed into the soft, muddy banks of the Sumida River. The mud acted as a shock absorber, cushioning the impact just enough to keep his heart beating. When the local civilians pulled him from the wreckage, they found a man who was more metal than flesh, his body broken but his spirit still tethered to the earth. He spent the final months of the war in a makeshift hospital, listening to the sound of more B-29s passing overhead. He listened to the radio as the divine wind failed to stop the tide. He listened as the emperor's voice, a voice he had been told was a god's voice, admitted that the war was over. He was a last samurai, a man who had sacrificed everything for a cause that no longer existed. He felt a profound, crushing sense of shame. Why had he survived when so many of his brothers had fallen? Why was he still breathing when the city he had sworn to protect was a graveyard? This is the human burden of the enemy's perspective. It is not the glory of the fight. It is the weight of the survival. Years later, Kenji Tanaka would visit the United States. He would stand in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum and look at the Enola Gay, the B-29 that changed the world. He looked at the silver skin, the same skin he had tried to pierce with his 20mm cannons. He realized then that he hadn't just been fighting a bomber. He had been fighting an entire civilization. The B-29 was the product of a nation that could build 3,000 of these giants, while Japan struggled to build 300. It was the product of a nation that had logistics as its primary weapon. While Kenji's mechanics were siphoning fuel from wrecks, the Americans were building floating dry docks and mobile airfields. He saw a group of American veterans standing near the bomber. They were laughing, sharing stories of their time in the Pacific. They saw his Haiyan pilot's pin on his lapel. They didn't look at him with hatred. They looked at him with a strange, quiet respect. "You were the one in the Tony?" one of them asked, a former B-29 tail gunner. Kenji nodded. "I was the one who failed." The American shook his head. "Nobody failed up there, son. We were all just caught in the same storm. The story of the last samurai of the air is not a story of victory. It is a story of the moment of realization, the day a warrior realized that his courage was no match for the industrial sledgehammer of the modern world. Today, the Kawasaki Ki-61 Swallow is a rare sight. Most were destroyed in the final days of the war, either in combat or by their own crews to prevent capture. But for those who fly the virtual skies or read the history books, the Tony remains a symbol of a desperate, tragic era. It reminds us that behind every enemy is a human being. A man with a father's headband, a struggling engine, and a heart full of a duty that the world has long since forgotten. As the sun sets over the modern skyline of Tokyo, the Firewind is a distant memory. The city is a forest of glass and light, but if you look closely at the muddy banks of the Sumida River, you might still find a piece of rusted aluminum, a fragment of a swallow that tried to stop the giants. Kenji Tanaka's story ends not with a bang, but with a quiet prayer for peace. Because in the end, the math of death always equals 0. And the only thing that survives the fire is the truth.